You ever had that moment where you catch yourself in the mirror, and for a split second you don't recognize who's looking back? Not because your hair's different or you're tired, but because you can't quite remember when you stopped feeling like you. If that's ever happened to you, I need you to understand something. It's not your imagination. It's not just getting older. And it's definitely not harmless. What's happening is a slow, invisible theft. And it's happening to millions of people quietly every single day. And here's the most unsettling part. The people taking your identity might be the people who claim to love you most. Now, before you think I'm talking about some dramatic betrayal or obvious manipulation, no. This is subtle, it's psychological. It's death by 1,000 tiny cuts, and those cuts come in the form of small, seemingly harmless moments. A partner telling you that's not really your thing when you show interest in something new. A friend joking, "Oh, that's not you," when you dress differently. Little by little, your edges get sanded down, your voice gets quieter, and the person you once were, the one with sharp opinions, weird quirks, wild ambitions, gets replaced by a watered-down version. Polished, acceptable, safe. And society loves safe people. Safe people keep the machine running. They do their job, pay their bills, smile on cue. But inside, they're hollow. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. To be yourself is the greatest achievement." He wasn't being poetic. He was warning us, because the tribe isn't always the enemy you expect. Sometimes it's the people closest to you. Your parents, your spouse, your best friends. Not because they're evil, but because they need you to stay predictable. Your growth, your change, your evolution threatens the stability of their world. Think about it. If you start changing your values, if you start pursuing the things you truly care about, it forces them to confront their own choices. And most people don't want that. They'd rather keep you in a box you never agreed to. The most dangerous part? This erasure doesn't happen in one dramatic moment. You don't wake up one day and think, "Wow, I've lost myself entirely." No, it happens so slowly you start thinking this is just who I am now. But if you trace it back, you'll see a trail of moments where you compromised a little bit more of yourself for the sake of peace, harmony, or acceptance. And here's the brutal truth. If you don't actively guard your identity, the world will write it for you. And that world isn't just governments or corporations, it's your social circles, your workplace, even your partner's expectations, not out of malice, but out of habit. But this, right here, right now, is your wake-up call. Because in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to walk you through 9 signs that your identity is being erased, often without you realizing it. We'll draw on psychology, on philosophy, and on the raw human truths most self-help gurus won't touch. Because this isn't about optimism. This is about survival, the survival of your mind, your values, your soul. By the end of this, you'll be able to look at your life, your relationships, your work, your habits, and see exactly where the slow fade has begun. And more importantly, you'll know how to stop it. Because here's the deal. The modern world is perfectly designed to strip away individuality. Social media turns everyone into copies chasing likes. Schools teach obedience, not curiosity. Workplaces reward conformity, not originality. And when the people you love start unknowingly playing along with this system, you won't even notice it happening. Until one day you realize the life you're living isn't yours anymore. Nietzsche once described the last man, the final stage of humanity where everyone lives in comfort, avoids risk, and never questions anything. That's the future waiting for you if you don't fight for your identity. And trust me, it's not a future you want. So if you've ever felt like you've become smaller over the years, you're constantly compromising, or you've stopped recognizing your own reflection, then keep listening. Because you're about to hear the truth you were never meant to hear. And it starts with the first and most overlooked sign. You wake up and check your phone before you even open the curtains. Overnight, hundreds of new opinions, headlines, and notifications have already poured into your mind. Before you've even had breakfast, the world has told you what's urgent, what's trending, and what you should care about. And here's the part no one likes to admit. Most of those things weren't even yours. You didn't choose them. They were served to you. Every day, our sense of self is quietly worn down. Not by one catastrophic event, but by thousands of tiny decisions and micro-compromises. It's the slow erosion of individuality, the death of the self in exchange for belonging, convenience, and safety. Think about the last time you kept your mouth shut in a meeting because you didn't want to make things complicated, or the time you wore something you didn't really like because you didn't want to stand out, or when you agreed with a friend's opinion just to avoid an argument. Individually, these moments feel harmless, but stacked together over years, they become the scaffolding of a false self, a you that doesn't truly exist except in service to what's socially acceptable. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Modern life doesn't just reward conformity, it punishes authenticity. Say the wrong thing online and you're canceled. Step outside the unspoken rules of your social group and you're quietly excluded. Dare to want something radically different for your life, and watch how quickly people warn you to be realistic. We tell ourselves this is just how the world works. But what if that's exactly the problem? There's a reason you feel this constant tug toward fitting in. It's been engineered into nearly every system you interact with. From an early age, schools rarely reward original thought. They reward correct answers. Creativity becomes a risk, not a strength. By the time you graduate, you're less concerned with what you think and more concerned with what's acceptable to think. Most companies don't want innovators, they want predictability. They create environments where the safest path to keeping your job is not standing out too much. And they call this professionalism. You think you're expressing yourself, but the algorithms are quietly teaching you what gets attention. Over time, you don't just share what's real, you share what performs. Eventually, your life becomes a highlight reel tailored for invisible judges you'll never meet. Even our identities are sold back to us. Every brand wants to tell you, this is who you are, so long as you buy their product. We express individuality by choosing between pre-approved labels, like picking a costume from a store shelf. I once spoke to a man who, by all accounts, had made it. He had the career, the house, the car, the friends who congratulated him on social media. But then he told me something I'll never forget. I woke up one morning and realized that every single thing in my life was something I'd once been told I was supposed to want. None of it was mine, not even my opinions. It wasn't a breakdown. It was a quiet, sickening clarity, the kind that makes you look at your own reflection and feel like you're staring at a stranger. He didn't get there because of one bad choice. He got there because of years of small surrenders, the slow swapping out of his real desires for socially approved ones until there was nothing left to trade. This is what Nietzsche was warning about. Not just the obvious tyranny of oppressive systems, but the far more dangerous self-imposed obedience that comes when you accept the values handed to you without question. Nietzsche's slave morality isn't just about morality in the religious sense. It's about a mindset of obedience, where you internalize someone else's values so deeply that you believe they're your own. And the most tragic part? Once you accept those values as truth, you will defend them, even against yourself. Why this hurts more than you realize. Losing yourself isn't always dramatic. It's not always rebellion or a crash and burn midlife crisis. Sometimes it's the quiet ache of realizing that the life you're living is perfectly fine, but it's not yours. That's the pain point no one talks about, that you can be successful and still feel like you're slowly disappearing, because the erosion of identity doesn't just rob you of your dreams, it robs you of the very will to dream at all. There comes a moment when the quiet ache becomes unbearable. It's not loud at first, it's subtle, like a dull hum in the background of your life. But over time, it grows. You notice it in the small ways. That second before you get out of bed when you wonder if anyone would notice if you didn't show up today. The pause before you send an email, where you ask yourself if this is really all you were born to do. The way you keep looking at the clock, waiting for a day to end that feels like it hasn't even begun. For most people, this is where they sink deeper into distraction. They buy something shiny, plan a vacation, scroll endlessly until their eyelids ache. It's easier to blur the edges of reality than to stare directly at the thing that's eating you alive. But some can't. Some people reach a point where the mask no longer fits. They see themselves in the reflection of a store window and don't recognize the person staring back. They realize the life they've built or inherited is not theirs. And this realization isn't a slow burn, it's a fire. Sometimes it's triggered by tragedy, the death of someone you love. Sometimes it's humiliation, the public collapse of a career you thought defined you. And sometimes it's boredom so deep it feels like drowning. Nietzsche called moments like this the great noon. When the sun is at its highest, casting no shadows to hide in, you see everything with brutal clarity. The life you have versus the life you want. The rules you've been following versus the truth you've been avoiding. This is the breaking point. And here's the part society doesn't tell you. Reaching it is both the most dangerous and the most powerful moment of your life. Why dangerous? Because most people retreat. They convince themselves they were just tired, that they were overthinking, that it's selfish to want more. And in doing so, they seal themselves into the very prison they wanted to escape. Why powerful? Because if you dare to face it, if you refuse to look away, this is where transformation begins. It's where obedience dies and self-authorship is born. Imagine two roads. On the first, you take the safe option. You keep your job, your habits, your circle. You tell yourself you'll change later when it's easier. On the second, you dismantle the life that's been handed to you. You walk into the unknown with nothing but your own judgment as a compass. Most people choose the first road because it feels responsible. But the truth? The safe road isn't safe at all. It's a slow death. The second road is terrifying. It's also the only one that's alive. If you're there right now, if you feel the walls closing in, know this: you're not broken, you're not failing, you're waking up. And waking up is supposed to hurt. The only question left is, what will you do now that you've seen the truth? You've reached your breaking point. But before you act, society has one more trick to play. It tells you that you are already free, that you are a good citizen, that your compliance is proof of your virtue, and you believe it because from birth you were conditioned to. The good citizen works hard, follows the rules, pays their taxes, and doesn't cause trouble. They do what's expected of them, and in exchange, they get the illusion of stability. But here's the brutal truth. The good citizen isn't free. They're a well-trained slave, rewarded just enough to keep the chains invisible. Obedience, when unquestioned, is not a virtue. It is the death of the self. From the moment you enter school, you're taught that following instructions without question is good. Question too much and you're labeled a troublemaker. Fail to obey and you're punished, not just with detention, but with shame, exclusion, and the threat of losing your place in the herd. By adulthood, this conditioning is so deep that people police themselves. They don't need a master, they've internalized one. Can you recognize a corporate chains in disguise? Think of the model employee who stays late every night, hoping for a promotion that never comes. They're praised for their dedication, but the truth is, they're a replaceable cog. They're not working toward freedom, they're maintaining someone else's empire. We can also spot the moral obedience theater. The person who posts all the right political slogans online, not because they've deeply examined their beliefs, but because it's safer to repeat what's approved than to risk social exile. And we all know how the self-policing prisoner looks like. Entire communities enforce conformity, gossiping about anyone who steps outside the expected roles. In this way, the system doesn't even need constant surveillance. The citizens keep each other in line. Karl Marx warned that the worker, under capitalism, is alienated, not only from the fruits of their labor, but from themselves. They become a stranger to their own life, selling their time in exchange for survival. Albert Einstein once wrote that he who joyfully marches in rank and file has already earned my contempt. His point wasn't to condemn cooperation, it was to warn against blind obedience that strips a person of independent thought. And Carl Jung? He would tell you that the good citizen has repressed their shadow, the wild, unapproved parts of themselves, until all that's left is a hollow mask. The system doesn't need to lock you in chains. It only needs you to fear what happens if you take them off. The tragedy is that most people will never know they were enslaved because they mistake obedience for goodness. They will defend the very system that keeps them small because freedom feels dangerous and unfamiliar. And when someone does break away, the others don't cheer. They call them reckless, selfish, ungrateful. They tell them to be realistic. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If you want real freedom, you have to be willing to stop being a good citizen. You have to risk being misunderstood, judged, even hated. Because as long as you're playing the role of the obedient, respectable adult, you're not truly living. You're performing. The problem with most philosophical awakenings is that they stay in the mind. People read Nietzsche, Camus, or Jung, nod along furiously, feel enlightened, and then get up the next morning, pour the same brand of coffee into the same chipped mug, and go right back to work in the same soul-draining system they just swore they were done with. That's not awakening, That's intellectual tourism, visiting the land of freedom without ever moving in. The real rebellion is not an idea, it is a practice. And if you want to escape the life you secretly hate, you can't just think differently. You have to live differently now. You've been trained to get your sense of worth from outside approval. Bosses, peers, followers, likes, paychecks, diplomas. That's the invisible leash around your neck. Cut it. Decide starting today that no amount of praise or criticism will dictate your value. It's not about becoming a cold, isolated rebel. It's about no longer being emotionally blackmailed into obedience. The first time you decline something that violates your inner compass, you will feel a wave of terror, followed by a surge of oxygen in your soul you forgot existed. Slavery today is rarely enforced with chains. It's enforced with constant availability. Your phone, your inbox, your instant reply to every demand. That is how the system eats you alive. Turn it off. Schedule hours, even a single hour a day, where you are unreachable, not on vacation, not in a meeting, just off the grid. At first, they'll call you irresponsible, then they'll call you unpredictable. Eventually, they'll realize they can't control you. The system teaches you to pick safe over alive. That is why so many people are quietly dead inside. The dangerous, the uncertain, the uphill. That's where your identity is rebuilt. Start small. Take the harder route home. Speak up when your instinct says stay silent. Create something without knowing if it will be approved or profitable. These micro acts of rebellion forge the muscle you'll need for bigger leaps. Look at your daily routine right now. If it was assigned to you by a dictator, would you obey it without question? If the answer is yes, you're already living under one. Rewrite a single day this week. Wake up at a different time. Do work in a different place. Eat food you've never tried. Start a conversation with someone unexpected. When you disrupt the pattern loses its grip. The greatest trick the system ever pulled was convincing you it exists outside you. But there is no they without you. Every time you obey without thought, you lend it power. Every time you disobey with purpose, you take some of that power back. Here's your rebellion seed for today. Say no to one thing you would normally agree to purely out of fear, politeness, or habit. Do it once. Feel the discomfort. Let it stretch you, because that's the muscle you'll use to break out completely. You will not drift your way into freedom. No one is coming to rescue you. Every day you delay, the life you hate cements itself deeper into your bones. Nietzsche didn't tell you this would be easy. He told you it would be worth it. And the question is no longer if you can escape. The only question is, will you act before the door closes for good?